Stone Temple Pilots, thank you. That's the album. This is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, brought to you by yours truly, Ryan Thomas, the host of the Thomas Take. And thank you all for staying, active and listening to the show. I really appreciate it. I asked you, the listeners, to submit me your Thomas Take mailbag questions, and part one of today's show is going to be dedicated to one question that I received from a diehard Buffalo Bills fan. That fan, I actually am drawing a blank at what his name is. But the question was, if the Buffalo Bills go 1-5, 1-4 in their first 5 games, where it's quite possible, and I take a look at the Bills' schedule and look at that schedule and think to myself, that is a possibility. What does the future hold for Tyrod Taylor? How long of a leash would Tyrod Taylor receive? And you look at the first 5 weeks of the schedule, they host the Jets week 1, they go to Carolina, they host Denver, they go to Atlanta, and they go to Cincinnati. So they very well could lose 4 of those games. Obviously, the one that they could win is the one versus the Jets. They could win 2 of those games, maybe given how well they play against Cincinnati. But let's just say, for the sake of the listener's question, that they do go 1-4. They have a bye week, week 6. So if the Bills start 1-4, only winning their first game and losing 4 straight, going into their bye week, which is a pretty early bye week, week 6, then hosting Tampa Bay on Fox, could the leash be pulled, or should the leash be pulled from Tyrod Taylor? That was the question by, I believe it was Bear Plord. I've had so many people send me questions, so it's tough to say who it was, and I apologize for forgetting that person's name. But I would say yes, hell yes, it would be at a point where we would have to pull the trigger on Tyrod, especially if you look at that said schedule that I was just referring to. Week 1, the quarterback they're going up against is Josh McCown, most likely for the New York Jets. Week 2, Cam Newton. Week 3, Trevor Siemian or Paxton Lynch. Week 4, Matt Ryan. Week 5, Andy Dalton. So if the only quarterback that Tyrod can go head-to-head against and beat is Josh McCown in that 5-game span, then yes, the listener of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, yes, they would pull the plug on Tyrod. I would assume that they would. They're much better than that. And if their offense is struggling, if their offense is one-dimensional, if Tyrod is throwing passes much like he did late in the season, then I could definitely see them pulling the trigger and going with Nate Peterman or maybe Cardale Jones. Week 6 in the season. Maybe benching Tyrod for the Buccaneers game and maybe putting Tyrod back in against the Oakland Raiders. But you think back last year to that Oakland Raiders game where they had the game pretty much well in hand, and the offense had a series of 3-and-outs quickly and was forcing the defense back out onto the field time and time again, to where the defense was completely exhausted, and Derek Carr completely tore them up. So do they put Tyrod back out for that game? And the Jets game, the second Jets game, would be Week 9. So that is a great question. To the listener, thank you for asking me that question on the Thomas Take mailbag. I think that that's a very valid question to ask. And so everybody knows, beyond this season, the Bills are not obligated to Tyrod Taylor whatsoever. This is a 1-year deal. They can get out of this deal and lose nothing, take no cap hit whatsoever. So this is a 1-year audition with a brand new head coach, with a brand new general manager. Tyrod has to prove that he is a franchise guy this year. What happened in the past does not matter. A new regime comes in. Most of the time, things change. the personnel changes when new scouts, new head coach, new GM come into the building. Things change. So Sean McDermott did give Tyrod a ringing endorsement. He did say that Tyrod was one of the benefactors of him being there. It was a benefit to have him on this team. But that's what coaches are kind of supposed to say. Sean McDermott is not obligated to Tyrod Taylor. He's more so obligated to putting out the best quarterback out there. And as of now, that is Tyrod. But then, a couple weeks later, Brandon Beane is actually a couple months later, Brandon Beane is hired as the general manager. And Brandon Beane is on WGR stating that, yes, this is a quarterback competition. There is a quarterback competition, as there should be. So I am more than willing to see the quarterback competition come out of Tyrod. Maybe make Tyrod a better player. I'm even more excited to see Nathan Peterman and what he can bring to the table. I'm extremely excited to see what the third stringer Cardale Jones can bring to the table in terms of his training camp / preseason. So Tyrod has a lot to prove. And to the listener's question, thank you. And I think that was a very valid, solid question. And it's a good way to look forward at the schedule and say, hey, worst case scenario, we lose 4 of our first 5, which is quite possible. What do they do with Tyrod? I would assume that they would bench him because they're not obligated to him whatsoever. And at that point, he wouldn't give them the best chance to win because they'd be 1-4. So they're going to have to heavily rely on LaShawn McCoy once again for this offense. Those inside the NFL media state that Tyrod is a perfect fit for Rick Dennison's offense. Well, we will see. If he does not look like he is a perfect fit, and to the listener's question, they go 1-4 in their first 5, then that would be virtually it for Tyrod. I'm pretty sure in terms of him starting in the National Football League for the Buffalo Bills. So they got 2 first-round picks next year. I don't think that they have any plans whatsoever on using one of those two first-round picks. Excuse me. I don't think they have any plans on using one of the 2 first-round picks that they have on a quarterback. I think they drafted Nathan Peterman for a reason. They got him late, got him in the 5th round. Most scouts state that he is a pro-ready guy, one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks in last year's draft class, and Buffalo got him in the 5th. Cardale Jones has a lot of raw ability, raw talent. So why invest that high of a pick on not a guaranteed product when you already have 2 low picks, 4th-round pick and a 5th-round pick in the case of Jones and Peterman, that you can invest in your team and build around? That's what I think would be the best case scenario if Tyrod were not to be up to par. They go forward in 2018 with one of those 2 quarterbacks, build around the quarterback, build the defense up with one of those first 2-round picks or the offensive line or the offense, or go double up on the defense, which is probably likely, and go from there. So definitely a lot to analyze with this question, and I was happy to receive it, and I'm happy to receive plenty more, and I'm going to start off with part 2 of the Thomas Take coming right up. But in case you guys don't know, I am Ryan Thomas. This is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, and it's based out of Buffalo, New York. If you haven't found out how to check this show out, you can check it out on YouTube. Go to the search bar of Thomas Take Sports Podcast. You can go to facebook.com/Thomas Takeover. That would bring you to the Thomas Take Facebook page. You can also follow me on Instagram, Ryan_Thomas31. I post a lot of interactive stuff on there with the Instagram story, Snapchat as well, RyT3145. Spreaker.com is where this podcast is streamed from. Spreaker is one of the leading apps around the world in terms of podcasts. Thousands upon thousands of podcasts are on this channel for people to listen to. Sports, politics, you name it, it's on here. And my podcast has done very well as of late in the 2017 year. January was successful during the NFL playoffs. February was successful during the Super Bowl. March leading up to the baseball season. Baseball stuff was big. Then April we had the draft. May there's been off-season stuff and sports headlines that I've been covering. NBA Finals now, the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Golden State Warriors. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in part 2. My prediction for how that series will go. And realistically, the outlook to me for the Boston Red Sox, my favorite baseball team, but I'm also going to throw in some fantasy players for the fantasy baseball listeners out there. I got a lot of fantasy baseball listeners on this show. So, like I said, tune in, and it's been a crazy, excuse me, it has been a crazy couple months with the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'd like to make an announcement as well that is official in the life of Ryan Thomas, yours truly. I will be writing for the Rochester Sports Network starting now. Rochester Sports Network covers Western New York sports, Rochester sports teams, which is it's a suburb city of Western New York. It is where the Buffalo Bills have their training camp. So I'll be looking forward to covering the Buffalo Bills during their training camp season this season once again. And I'm very excited for the opportunity. So I can't wait to get started. The draft next year is going to be even bigger and better for me because I'll be more involved in it than I was even this year. And I'll be covering a team that has not one but 2 first-round picks, which is pretty exciting. So stay tuned. Part 2 of the Thomas Take, I'm going to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors, Part 3. Third time's the charm for which team? Which team is going to take it? How is it going to go down? Why do I think it's going to go down that way? And for what reason do I think that this will happen? So tune in. Obviously, this is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Thomas Takeover. You can find me virtually anywhere. If you look and you type in Thomas Take on Facebook, Thomas Take on YouTube, Thomas Take on Twitter, you'll find it. It's everywhere. So really appreciate the support. Appreciate the mailbag questions. I want to dedicate this episode to the listener that asked me the Tyrod question. The comment was left in a comment on a Facebook post that I wrote. I post so much stuff on Facebook that I could not find the name of the listener. So I'll find out who that was and shout him out on the next part. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Tune in to part 2. We'll be right back.